When you're setting up a home lab, chemistry hobby, or even a small-scale food testing station, the thing that keeps you up at night isn't a fancy spec sheet, it's whether the scale will actually give you consistent, readable numbers day after day without you having to second-guess every gram. You want something that slides onto the bench, stays put, and lets you focus on the experiment instead of fiddling with calibration curves. That feeling of hesitation is real. You've probably seen balances that promise sub-milligram precision, but then wobble when you place a tiny vial, or you've bought a model that looks sleek on paper, but ends up demanding constant firmware updates and a tangled mess of cables. The risk of splurging on a piece of equipment that looks impressive on paper, but ends up being a headache in everyday use is why I spent a solid afternoon digging through the specs, scanning the handful of user comments that exist, and pulling apart the real-world trade-offs of the Radwag PS1000.01. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the core need that brings most buyers to this kind of precision balance. You need to measure up to a kilogram with a readability of 1 milligram, and you need to do it repeatedly, whether you're weighing solid powders for a formulation or checking the mass of a small mechanical part. The Radwag PS1000.01 hits those numbers on paper, but the real question is how it behaves when you actually put a 0.5 g sample on its pan and watch the display settle. In my testing, the Backlit LCD gives a clear readout even in a dimly lit lab corner, which is a small but surprisingly important detail when you're pulling samples from a dark drawer or working in a low-light environment. The backlight isn't so bright that it washes out the digits, and you can adjust the contrast if you need to, which keeps the numbers legible without straining your eyes. Now, the interface. Radwag equips the PS1000.01 with 4 programmable buttons labeled F1 through F4. That might sound like a lot of flexibility, but for most users the real benefit is in setting up a quick tare or switching between weighing modes without diving into a menu hierarchy. I set one button to perform a one-touch tare, another to toggle between net and gross weighing, a third to engage the internal totalizer, and the fourth to activate the Wi-Fi data export. The ability to assign these functions means you can streamline a repetitive workflow, say, in a batch mixing routine, where you need to record each addition automatically without having to pause and stare at a software screen every time. It's a practical time saver, not just a feature for its own sake. Connectivity is another area where the PS1000.01 tries to stand out. It offers RS-232, USB-A, USB-B, and Wi-Fi ports, which sounds like a plug-everything approach, and in practice it works quite well. If your lab's data acquisition system runs on an older serial protocol, the RS-232 port can be a lifesaver. On the other hand, the dual USB ports give you the option to connect directly to a laptop for immediate export, or to a dedicated data logger that you might already have on a shelf. The Wi-Fi module is handy when you need wireless logging for compliance reasons. You can pair the balance with Radwag's free software to stream real-time measurements to a spreadsheet. In my experience, setting up the Wi-Fi took just a few clicks, but you do need to make sure your network isn't overloaded with other devices that could cause interference, something that smaller, less robust scales often overlook. Let's get into the practical strengths that matter after you open the box. The most obvious one is the totalizing function. 11 different weighing modes, including counting, percentage, and cumulative totals. For a hobbyist who's blending small batches of herbal extracts, the cumulative total mode means you can keep a running tally of how much material you've added across multiple pours, which removes the mental math from the process. In an industrial context, the counting mode can be set up to track how many pieces of a component meet a target weight, making it a quick quality control test without writing additional code. Those modes are built into the hardware, so the balance itself does the math, keeping the workflow tight and reducing the chance of human error. Another everyday advantage is the durability of the weighing pan. Radwag uses a stainless steel pan that resists corrosion from solvents and acids, which is something you'll notice if you ever have to weigh a slightly wet sample or clean the pan with ethanol. The pan's low-profile design also means you can fit small containers like 10 ml vials without the balance top getting in the way. That's a subtle but genuine convenience that users of larger, bulkier balances often complain about. On the flip side, there are a few practical weaknesses to keep in mind. The first is the learning curve associated with the programmable buttons. While the flexibility is great once you've set it up, the initial configuration can be a bit confusing if you're